Good morning, sixth graders. It's Mrs. Domek, and I hope you had a great weekend. It was a long weekend for you guys, and I hope you're staying safe and you're having fun, having to spend some time, being able to spend some time with your family. All right, so we're going to look at our reading selection today. It is on page 21. So for April 21st, we're going to go to page 21 to 23. All right, so I'm going to read this selection to you, and then I'll read the questions, and then you'll be doing the answers. All right, so this is a scientific account, so it's nonfiction. Then answer the questions that follow, looking for the Loch Ness Monster. All right, paragraph 1. The word loch is a Scottish Gaelic word for lake. So we just need to remember that loch means lake. And there are a whole lot of lochs in Scotland, more than 500 of them. But one loch, Loch Ness, in the Scottish Highlands, is known around the world. The reason for its fame is not its great size or beauty. People know the name Loch Ness because it is said to be the home of a mysterious giant creature known as the Loch Ness Monster. Whether the creature really exists or not has been a matter of great debate for decades. What does Nessie, the popular nickname for the monster, supposedly look like? By most accounts, she has a small head on a very long neck. Her body is broad and rounded, with 4 flippers and a long tail. If you know your prehistoric creatures, you might be thinking, Nessie sounds like a plesiosaur, a giant sea reptile that lived hundreds of millions of years ago. One common theory about Nessie is that she actually is a plesiosaur. Other explanations for Nessie are far less dramatic. Some people think that the mysterious creature people have mistaken for a monster may have been nothing more than a walrus, seal, or eel. All right, how could a creature as big as a plesiosaur hide in a lake? Well, Loch Ness is a huge body of water. It's the second largest loch in Scotland based on the surface area of its water. Loch Ness covers more than 21 square miles, and only Loch Lomond is bigger. But if you look at the volume of water, Loch Ness is the biggest, and that's because it's deep, about 755 feet at its deepest point. This single loch contains more water than all the freshwater lakes in England. In other words, it's one big place to hide. All right, let's look real quick at this picture or this illustration and the caption that goes with it. And it says, an artist's depiction of a plesiosaur. So this is what an artist thinks that a plesiosaur looks like. All right, and it sounds just like, doesn't it, how they describe Nessie. Her body is, she has a small head on a very long neck, just like this plesiosaur. Her body is broad and rounded, with 4 flippers and a long tail. So the way they describe Nessie is exactly the way a plesiosaur looks, and that's why some people really believe that it was a plesiosaur. All right, so paragraph 4. Some people who believe in Nessie say that she's made her home in the region for more than 1,000 years. A book written in the 7th century tells about an Irish monk who saw a giant water beast in the River Ness in 565 CE. No one thought much about that story until 1933. A couple was driving home along the loch late one night. They said they were forced to stop when a giant, dragon-like creature crossed the road and slid into the water. Their story appeared in newspapers. Soon, many more people claimed to have seen the monster. The following year, in 1934, a doctor from England took a photo that became famous worldwide. The poorly lit, grainy photo shows what looks like the head and long neck of a plesiosaur-like creature rising from the water. The photo served as proof of the monster until 60 years later when it was revealed to be a fake. Since the 1930s, dozens of serious scientific searches have been undertaken to find the Loch Ness Monster. One early effort involved placing scouts with cameras and binoculars around the loch for 5 weeks. Later searches relied on the use of sonar. This method involves bouncing sound waves through the deep waters of the loch to detect moving objects. In 2003, the famous British Broadcasting Corporation, BBC, sponsored one of the most thorough searches ever. Scientists used 600 sonar beams and satellite tracking. What did they find? Nothing of note, really. They concluded that Nessie was a myth. After so many attempts, you have to wonder why people keep looking for the Loch Ness Monster. It may just be that there's something exciting about the idea of mysterious creatures living so close to us, always just out of view. There's a word for such creatures, cryptids. It comes from a Greek word meaning to hide. The Loch Ness Monster is one of many cryptids that have captured the public imagination. Others include Bigfoot in North America, the Yeti in the Himalaya Mountains, and the Chupacabra in the southwestern United States and Mexico, and we read a story about them, didn't we? Many animals whose existence we take for granted today might once have been considered cryptids. Komodo dragons and giant squids were once thought to be tall tales. Until 1902, people regarded stories of giant ape men living in Africa as just a myth. Today, we know them as mountain gorillas. The odds of Nessie turning out to be real may not be quite as good. But if it were true, we'd all love it, wouldn't we? It's exciting to think that a real live monster lives deep in a loch in Scotland. How about that? Interesting stuff. All right, so now we're going to look at the questions. I'm going to read them, but I'd like you to go back in the story and find evidence for the answer. So, according to the account, what is one reason many people believe the Loch Ness Monster does not exist? A, the earliest sighting of the Loch Ness Monster occurred in 565 CE. B, the photo taken in 1934 has been proven to be a fake. C, plesiosaurs, like the dinosaurs, lived hundreds of millions of years ago. D, sonar beams and satellite tracking found no evidence in the loch. So which of those, or according to what is one reason many believe the Loch Ness Monster does not exist? So you're looking for the answer that is a reason that many people believe that the Loch Ness Monster does not exist. All right? All right, mark your answer and we'll go to 2. Which detail provides evidence that a creature as huge as a plesiosaur could really hide in Loch Ness? All right, A, Loch Ness has a surface area of 21 square miles and is 755 feet deep. B, the Loch Ness Monster might actually be an ordinary walrus, seal, or eel. C, dozens of scientific searches of Loch Ness have been conducted. And D, the Loch Ness Monster is known as a cryptid, a word whose root word means to hide. So which one of these gives the evidence that a creature as huge as the plesiosaur could hide in Loch Ness? And if you remember, they talked about that reason up here. But if you look at the volume of, let's see, okay. All right, so the fact that it's the second largest loch in Scotland and it's 21 square miles and 755 feet, then it is a very large loch or lake. And so that's why they think that it's possible that it could have, or that's the evidence that a creature that huge could really hide in the loch. All right, so mark your answer there, and we'll go to 3. Which statement is best supported by the account? Okay, so I'm going to read these, and you're going to tell me which one is best supported by this story we read. Okay, A, it is illogical to think that a plesiosaur could still be living in Loch Ness today. B, someday scientists will prove that no giant creatures live in Loch Ness. C, some people want to believe in the Loch Ness Monster and ignore scientific evidence showing it does not exist. D, people have always been fascinated by the idea of strange creatures such as Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster. So which of these statements is best supported by the story we just read? All right, mark your answer. And number 4. Okay. It says, despite the great interest in the Loch Ness Monster, it is highly unlikely that such an animal actually exists. Which sentence from the passage best supports this conclusion? A, whether the creature really exists or not has been a matter of great debate for decades. B, some people who believe in Nessie say that she's made her home in the region for more than 1,000 years. C, since the 1930s, dozens of serious scientific searches have been undertaken to find the Loch Ness Monster. D, many animals whose existence we take for granted today might once have been considered cryptids. All right, and you need to pick the one that supports that it is highly unlikely that such an animal actually exists. Which sentence from the passage best supports this conclusion? All right, so mark your answer there, and we will go on to 5. This is the short answer. All right, so I'm going to give you a starter sentence on it, but this question says, some people firmly believe that the Loch Ness Monster is actually a plesiosaur. Use at least 3 details from the account to explain why some people believe this. All right, so let me do a text box here, and I'll give you your starter sentence and give you a hint. All right, so remember, we're going to restate the question. So some people believe the Loch Ness Monster is actually a plesiosaur because, and then you want to tell why. So you're going to go ahead and finish that. Oh, that won't give me a line, will it? Oops, hold on. And then you're going to put the because reasons in there on your, oops, oh my goodness. All right, well, you have a lot more lines, so you go ahead and use your lines to fill that in. All right, I'm going to give you a hint, but you probably don't even need it, but I'm going to give you a hint. So some people believe the Loch Ness Monster is actually a plesiosaur because, all right, well, let's go back up here to, I believe it was in paragraph 2 here, that they talk about why people think that the Loch Ness Monster was actually a plesiosaur. So in this paragraph, so you'll want to reread it, and I'll reread it now. What does Nessie, the popular nickname for the monster, supposedly look like? By most accounts, she has a small head on a very long neck. Okay, there's one reason that people think that Loch Ness or monster or Nessie is a plesiosaur. Her body is broad and rounded with 4 flippers and a long tail, and you can see from this artist's depiction that that's what the plesiosaur looked like. And if you know your prehistoric creatures, you might be thinking Nessie sounds like a plesiosaur, a giant sea reptile that lived hundreds of millions of years ago. All right, so those are some details in that paragraph that tell you why people think that she is actually, or the Loch Ness Monster is actually a plesiosaur. All right. Okay, we're going to move on down there. Go ahead and write your short answer out. And oh, that's it for, hold on. I think that's it for today. All right. Well, that wasn't so bad. All right, so go ahead and mark your answers, write your short answer response, and that's it. Oh wait, that's not it for today. That's just the first part. Hold on while I pause and find your next assignment. All right, our next selection is on page 52, and it's another story that we're going to read. And it's called A Sewing Sensation. All right, so let's take a look at this. It says Juan sat on the floor of Mom's sewing room with one eye on his soccer magazine and one eye on his mother. His mother was making a wedding dress for their neighbor's daughter, and Juan could see that the dress was going to be beautiful. Juan's mother had designed and sewn dresses for many of the girls in his town, and Juan felt proud that people wanted to wear his mother's creations on their special days. Juan glanced up again from his magazine and asked, "Is your machine running okay, Mom? I think it's making a weird noise." Mom hardly looked up and said, "I think it's working just fine. Fine, it's whirring and humming away just as always." All right, I'm going to stop there for 1 second. I forgot to mention, I hope you're reading along with me and not just listening to the story, but read along with me. All right, we are on paragraph 4. Juan looked disappointed, but he went back to pretending to read his magazine. A few minutes later, he asked, "Do you want me to sew the hem of the dress so that you can rest your fingers? I watched you do it millions of times, so I could do it for you. Do it if you are really tired." This time, Juan's mother studied Juan's face carefully. "You know, I could use a break," she said, "and we need some new pillowcases. I've got the pattern cut out, and all you'd have to do is stitch up the sides." Juan dropped his magazine and was sitting in Mom's sewing chair in no time. Juan's mom carefully removed the dress she was working on, showed Juan how to thread the sewing machine, and brought him some pillowcases to sew. In his enthusiasm, Juan stomped on the foot pedal and almost sewed over his finger. Then he remembered the patience that his mother always showed, and he slowed down. His seams were straight and even. Juan had a huge smile on his face when he looked over his shoulder at his mom. "I can't believe you sewed that so perfectly on your first try," Mom said, patting Juan on the back. "It took me years of practice to perfect my technique, and you're already a sensation. Why don't you try making a pillow for your room? You can design it, and I'll show you how to make the pattern and cut it out." Juan's face lit up, but then a dark shadow seemed to pass over it. "I think I should probably just go outside and kick the ball with my friends." To himself he muttered, "What would Anthony think if he saw me at a sewing machine?" as he headed outdoors. Mom didn't say anything as she watched Juan's reaction, but that night at dinner she and Juan's dad began talking about a local fashion designer who had moved to Dallas and become a very successful clothing designer. Juan pretended he wasn't listening, but the scowl slowly vanished from his face. "Many of the best fashion designers are men," Juan's dad continued. "They can make a lot of money for their designs." After dinner, Juan got out his notebook and began sketching. Then he showed his notebook to his mother, and she nodded approvingly. Together they headed to the sewing room for pattern tracing paper and scissors. Juan cut out 2 large round pieces of cloth and began stitching them together, leaving one section open. He turned the cloth inside out, stuffed the opening with cotton batting, and then sewed up the open section. Finally, he used fabric markers to add details. He placed his finished creation on his bed. The next day, Anthony came over to kick the ball with Juan, but it started to rain. The two headed to Juan's room to watch soccer videos instead. When Anthony saw the new oversized soccer ball on Juan's bed, he asked Juan where he got it. Juan grinned at his friend and said, "Mine is one of a kind, but I think I know how to get you one that's almost like it." All right, let's look at the questions. I'm going to read them and then you pick out the answer you think it is. Number 1 says, Juan does not have a lot of experience with sewing. That means that he hasn't sewn very much at all. Which sentence from the passage is the best evidence of this claim? A. Juan glanced up again from his magazine and asked, "Is your machine running okay, Mom? I think it's making a weird noise." B. I can't believe you sewed that so perfectly on your first try, Mom said, patting Juan on the back. C. To himself, he muttered, "What would Anthony think if he saw me at a sewing machine?" as he headed outdoors. D. Many of the best fashion designers are men, Juan's dad continued. So what's the evidence that shows or supports that Juan has not done very much sewing at all? All right, let's go on to number 2. Juan is very excited about learning to sew. Which of the following sentences from the passage best supports this statement? Okay, A. Juan felt proud that people wanted to wear his mother's creations on their special days. B. Juan sat on the floor of Mom's sewing room with one eye on his soccer magazine and one eye on his mother. C. Juan had a huge smile on his face when he looked over his shoulder at his mom. D. Then he remembered the patience that his mother always showed and he slowed down. All right, so on that one, which one shows that he is very excited about learning to sew? All right. All right, you mark what you think it is, and we will move on. All right, number 3. Which detail best supports the idea that Juan's mother encourages her son's interests? A, she tells him that her sewing machine doesn't require fixing. B, she gives him some pillowcases to sew on his own. C, she sends him outside to play ball instead of sewing. D, she gives him a notebook for sketching and drawing. All right, so which of those details supports the idea that Juan's mother encourages her son's interests? All right, and now we move on to number 4. What is one reason Juan chooses to play soccer with his friends instead of continuing to sew? A, he knew that he needed to practice if he wanted to improve his soccer skills. B, he did not want his friends to think he was rude for keeping them waiting. C, he thought that his father would not approve of his interest in sewing. D, he was concerned that his friends might make fun of his sewing talent. So which of those reasons is that Juan chooses to play soccer with his friends instead of continuing to sew? All right, you mark your answer there. And then we'll move on to 5. Juan seems somewhat embarrassed about his strong interest in sewing. Write a paragraph in which you agree or disagree with that statement. Use at least 2 details from the story to support your answer. All right, so you decide which one you want to say, that Juan seems somewhat embarrassed about his strong interest in sewing. Do you agree with that or do you disagree with that? And so when you write this, you're going to, you are going to, hold on, write it in your box here or on your lines, okay? And then you decide whether you agree with this or disagree with this. And then you would write, I agree or disagree, whatever, that Juan seems somewhat embarrassed about his strong interest in sewing because, and then you find 2 details from the story that supports that. Okay, so, okay, let's see. Now, all right. And now if you disagree with that, you just would write, I disagree, and then all the rest of it. That Juan seems somewhat embarrassed because. So you decide whether you think that Juan seems somewhat embarrassed about his strong interest in sewing, and then you have to get 2 details from the story to support your answer. Okay? All right, I will let you work on that. And now we're done. Is that right? Are we done? I believe we are done. All right, so guys, good luck with that, and I will see you tomorrow.